The moment I realized I had more control over the communication in my marriage than I thought was the moment that our relationship changed forever. If you're tired of repeated conflicts, blow-up fights, or even just the annoying daily spats of marriage, then this video is for you. I'm Cameron, I'm a licensed therapist, wife, and mother, and this is my channel, Modern Marriage, where I share with you guys all the tips, resources, and insights that I've gathered working with couples in therapy so that you can start building the relationship that you've always wanted. So a few years into my marriage, I began to recognize some patterns in how I communicated with my husband that I didn't particularly like. And as the person who brought up most of the conflict in our marriage, these patterns were present in the majority of the conflicts that we had. To be honest, it was hard to swallow at first. Up to that point, I had believed that it takes two to tango, as they say, when in reality, a lot of unnecessary conflict could have been avoided if I were more focused on how I was showing up to the marriage, specifically how I chose to communicate with my husband, than on how my husband communicated with me. Of course, my husband isn't perfect either. But what I realized was that the way I could most positively influence his communication was by cleaning up my own, rather than calling him out for his own mistakes. It turned out that the more positive and constructive my own words and tone were, the less we ever even got to the level of a disagreement. That's because couples communication is cyclical, meaning that we go through cycles where we both adopt specific positions or habits in how we interact with each other, and we tend to hold really tight to those positions, even if they're ineffective or counterproductive. For example, many couples struggle communicating when they come together after a long day, since they're both a lot more stressed and tired than they would be at any other time of the day. So what ends up happening is that one spouse will make a snarky comment or act uninterested in spending time together or any other number of small things, and then the other spouse will react defensively, and the issue escalates from there, as both spouses lock into their respective positions on opposite sides of the boxing ring. However, once one spouse takes the gloves off and chooses to respond to the other with love and understanding, suddenly the boxing match that was bound to take place disappears into thin air. So I guess it does take two to tango, but what that really means is that the moment you choose to engage with your spouse differently, a fight can't happen at all. I call this controlling your presence, or focusing on perfecting your own speech before criticizing your partner or your spouse's speech. For me personally, I found there were 4 specific ways that my communication was lacking, all of which are pretty common issues I see in couples in my personal and professional life as well. But before I get into each of these areas, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this, and send this video to someone who you think might benefit from it. Okay, so now for the 4 things I noticed that I didn't love about the way I was communicating. They are, number 1, jumping to blame. Number 2, making snarky or quick responses. Number 3, guilt tripping. And number 4, beating a dead horse, or continuing to fight once my husband had already given up. Number 1, jumping to blame. So probably the most common for me was being quick to blame my husband when things went wrong. So I'll give you an example. Our stroller has gotten soaked several times from being left outside overnight, and then an unexpected rain happens. So rather than chalking that up to bad luck, sometimes I'd get frustrated with my husband, acting as if it was his fault that the stroller got soaked or that it rained or whatever. Of course, that wasn't true. After all, I forgot about the stroller just as much as he did, and he doesn't control the weather, as far as I know. And even if I had asked him to put it away and he forgot, that would have obviously been a total accident and something that I should just let go instead of punish him for. By blaming him for the issue, not only did I make him feel bad, but I also wasted a bunch of my own emotional energy, and it turned out that that did not dry the stroller any faster. Next, making snarky or quick responses. There have been times when I wish my husband would speak to me differently. Marriage, am I right? But where I would often go wrong is in escalating a really small conflict into a bigger issue by allowing my gut reactions to take over. I can pretty much think of a quick, snarky response to anything. It's just part of who I am. But when I used to give in to that temptation, it never led anywhere good. In fact, it usually made things devolve into an argument that we could have avoided had I just left things alone. After all, my husband is human, and sometimes he gets tired or stressed or overwhelmed, and most of the times it has nothing to do with me. Now for guilt tripping. This is a big one. I have seen a lot of women in particular use this tactic when they're fighting with their husbands. and I have certainly laid my fair share of guilt trips. When you're focused on beating your spouse in a fight at any cost, the guilt trip can actually be a really effective way to win. Rather than sticking to the topic that we were discussing, sometimes I'd use language in a way to make my husband feel worse about what he'd done than was actually warranted. For example, I might say something like, "It really hurt me when you did this or said that," even if at the time it actually did not bother me that much. Although this tactic effectively shifted the conversation to how hurt my feelings were, it did nothing to help us solve the conflict, and it made my husband feel bad. And last but certainly not least, beating a dead horse. Probably my husband's least favorite, because this is something he's actually brought up to me before, is once we get into a disagreement, oftentimes he would give up. He'd put his sword down and he would try to make amends, either by apologizing or by asking for a hug or something else. But I was so in the mode of fighting, I so wanted to win or to make him feel the way that I felt, that I would keep up the fight even after he had already given up. If it isn't obvious already, I am not perfect. But after realizing how much I disliked some of the ways that I was communicating with my husband, I set to work on taking control of my presence in our marriage. And we certainly have far fewer disagreements now, even though we're two working parents with a house and kids, and theoretically a lot more to disagree about now than we ever have had in the past. Of course, pointing the finger at myself required giving up a lot of my pride, which always hurts. It also required, and still does require, a constant attention to how I'm showing up in my marriage from moment to moment. And I mean constant attention. It's certainly not easy to maintain that level of awareness. It takes a lot of effort, but man, has it been worth it. And of course, I believe that if it did so much for my marriage, that controlling your presence in your own relationship could do even more wonders for yours. Okay guys, what did you think of this video? Does this align with your experiences with communicating in marriage and long-term relationships? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, I'm Cameron, and this is Modern Marriage.